Under the weight of precision, the clicking of the slide echoed through the sterile testing chamber as Lieutenant Colonel David Crane examined the sleek black pistol in his hands. The Beretta M9 felt foreign against his palm, lighter than the aging .45s that had served American forces for 7 decades, yet somehow more precise. Outside, snow fell on the Aberdeen proving ground, and inside these walls, the United States Army was about to make the most controversial sidearm decision in its modern history. Crane didn't know it yet, but he was holding the future of military standardization, and with it, a gamble that would reshape how America armed its soldiers. The year was 1985, and the fluorescent lights above cast harsh shadows across the testing table, where 4 pistols lay in clinical arrangement. Each weapon represented a different philosophy of warfare, a different answer to the same urgent question: what does America need to survive the next war? The Smith & Wesson gleamed with familiar American steel, while the German Heckler & Koch spoke of Teutonic precision. The Sig Sauer carried Swiss neutrality in its lines, but it was the Italian Beretta that seemed to whisper of something else entirely. Compromise, perhaps, or evolution. Crane's fingers traced the pistol grip, noting how it seemed designed for hands smaller than his own. The irony wasn't lost on him that America might adopt a weapon created by the same nation that had fought against them barely 4 decades earlier. His grandfather had carried a .45 through the Pacific, trusting its bone-breaking power to stop charging Japanese soldiers in the jungles of Guadalcanal. Now NATO standardization demanded that American forces adopt the 9mm Parabellum cartridge to ensure ammunition compatibility with Allied forces. The Army needed a modern sidearm, and they needed it fast. But choosing foreign steel over American iron would prove to be a decision that cut deeper than mere logistics. The decision to even consider foreign weapons had sparked protests from American manufacturers and congressional hearings that questioned the Pentagon's patriotism. How could the nation that had armed the free world now turn to foreign suppliers? Yet here stood Crane, methodically working through the test protocols that would ultimately determine which pistol would serve American soldiers for the next generation. Behind the Beretta M9 lay not one mind, but the collective genius of an Italian firearms dynasty that had been forging weapons since the Renaissance. The Beretta family had armed Venetian merchants, Napoleonic soldiers, and Italian partisans. But it was Tullio Marangoni, a quiet engineer working in the shadows of the Beretta factory in Brescia, who designed the foundation that would eventually become the M9. Born into poverty in northern Italy, Marangoni had learned precision from his father, a clockmaker whose shop barely survived the Depression. In the testing chamber, Crane loaded 15 rounds into the Beretta's magazine, more than double the capacity of the venerable M1911. The extra ammunition represented tactical advantages that couldn't be ignored in an era when soldiers might face sustained firefights in urban environments or extended patrols where resupply was uncertain. Yet each additional round also represented a step away from American tradition, an acknowledgement that the old ways might not be sufficient for future conflicts. The first shots rang out across the range, each report measured and recorded by technicians who understood that their data would influence procurement decisions worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The Beretta's recoil felt different, lighter, more controlled than the .45's authoritative thump. It was a sensation that would become familiar to hundreds of thousands of American soldiers, though they couldn't know it yet. What emerged from these initial trials surprised everyone. The Beretta 92F, soon to be designated the M9, didn't just meet requirements, it exceeded them. Its double-action trigger allowed for safer carry conditions. The open slide design reduced jamming from debris. Most remarkably, it maintained accuracy and reliability even after punishment that would have destroyed its competitors. Yet the victory came with a price that few anticipated: American pride. Colonel Robert Haskell, head of the Army's small arms program, had already begun preparing for the political firestorm that would follow any decision to adopt a foreign weapon. The tests were brutal: 90,000 rounds through each pistol, exposure to sand, mud, extreme temperatures, and deliberate abuse that would break lesser weapons. But politics and engineering excellence rarely aligned neatly, and Haskell knew that choosing the best weapon might require defending that choice before Congress, the media, and a generation of soldiers who had grown up believing that American-made meant superior. In Aberdeen's cold winter air, steam rose from the test barrels as round after round proved the Italian pistol's worth. The snow outside continued to fall, each flake a reminder that time was running short. NATO allies were already standardizing on 9mm ammunition, and American forces needed a weapon that could share logistics with their European counterparts. The Cold War demanded cooperation, even when cooperation meant swallowing national pride. As Crane set down the Beretta and picked up the next pistol in line, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was witnessing more than a simple weapons test. This was America learning to see itself differently, not as the sole arsenal of democracy, but as one member of an alliance that sometimes required uncomfortable compromises. The implications would ripple far beyond Aberdeen proving ground, touching the lives of soldiers not yet born and reshaping how America armed itself for wars not yet fought. If stories like this make you question what you'd do in someone else's boots, tell us in the comments how you imagine you'd react in this camp, and stay with us for the next chapters. What does it mean when the weapon that protects you comes from yesterday's enemy? 4,000 miles from Aberdeen's testing chambers, in a modest apartment overlooking the industrial sprawl of Brescia, an elderly man named Tullio Marangoni watched the evening news with quiet satisfaction. The Italian television report mentioned only briefly that an American military delegation had visited the Beretta factory, but Marangoni understood what it meant. 43 years after he had first sketched improvements to pistol design while German soldiers patrolled his streets, his ideas might finally serve the cause of freedom. When young Tullio first held a mechanical drawing pencil in 1938, he discovered that his hands could translate the intricate clockwork patterns of his childhood into the deadly mechanics of warfare. His father's watch repair shop had taught him that precision was not merely about measurement, but about understanding how forces moved through metal, how springs stored energy, and how the smallest imperfection could cause catastrophic failure. Marangoni's breakthrough had come during the dark years of World War II, when he witnessed the limitations of existing military sidearms firsthand. Working under German occupation, forced to produce weapons for the Wehrmacht, he secretly sketched improvements to pistol design: higher capacity magazines, improved reliability, reduced manufacturing complexity. These weren't just engineering exercises, they were acts of quiet rebellion, ways to imagine a future where Italian craftsmanship might serve justice rather than tyranny. His designs had lain dormant for decades, refined and perfected through iterations that bore names like the M1951 and the 92 series. Each version had brought him closer to what he believed a modern military sidearm should be: reliable enough to function in any climate, simple enough to manufacture in wartime, and accurate enough to give soldiers confidence in their equipment. Meanwhile, at Aberdeen, the American adoption process had begun with skepticism that bordered on hostility. For 74 years, U.S. forces had trusted the stopping power of the .45 ACP cartridge. The notion of replacing this proven system with a European 9mm seemed like betrayal to many career officers. The testing protocol reflected this reluctance. Each pistol would fire 90,000 rounds, endure temperature extremes from -40 to +160 degrees Fahrenheit, and submit to deliberate abuse that included being buried in sand, dropped from vehicles, and subjected to impacts that would shatter lesser weapons. Colonel Haskell found himself in the uncomfortable position of defending a process that he knew might select a foreign weapon. His own service record included 2 tours in Vietnam carrying a .45, and he understood the emotional attachment that soldiers developed to their weapons. Yet he also understood that sentiment could not override performance when lives were at stake. The first week of testing had revealed disturbing patterns. The Smith & Wesson entries showed promise but suffered reliability issues after extended firing. The German and Swiss pistols performed admirably but carried price tags that would strain procurement budgets. The Beretta, however, continued to function with mechanical precision even as round counts climbed toward levels that would represent months of combat use. Dr. Sarah Chen, the civilian engineer overseeing the ammunition compatibility tests, had begun to notice something remarkable about the Italian pistol. Its chamber dimensions and feed mechanisms seemed almost designed for the 9mm Parabellum cartridge, rather than merely adapted to it. This wasn't accidental. Marangoni had spent years studying captured German ammunition during the war, understanding how the 9mm ballistics could be optimized through careful chamber design. In her technical reports, Dr. Chen noted that the Beretta's accuracy remained consistent even after thousands of rounds had worn away the pristine factory finish. The open slide design that some American critics had dismissed as foreign complexity actually prevented debris accumulation that could cause feeding problems in dusty environments. Each innovation reflected decades of thoughtful engineering, not flashy marketing. But innovation alone couldn't overcome political resistance. Congressman William Morrison of Michigan, whose district included several defense contractors, had already begun questioning whether foreign weapons met American security standards. His concerns weren't entirely political. During World War II, dependency on foreign suppliers had created logistical nightmares when shipping lanes came under attack. Could America risk similar vulnerability during a future conflict? The testing continued through Aberdeen's harsh winter, each day bringing new data that complicated simple answers. The Beretta's 15-round magazine capacity represented a significant tactical advantage over the M19-117 rounds, but it also meant that American soldiers would carry more ammunition weight during long patrols. The pistol's lighter weight reduced fatigue, but some questioned whether it would provide adequate stopping power against determined attackers. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, a military police officer assigned to observe the testing, found herself thinking about these trade-offs during her evening runs around Aberdeen. Her father had served in Korea carrying a .45, and she had grown up hearing stories about the pistol's legendary reliability. Yet watching the Beretta function flawlessly through scenarios that left other weapons disabled, she began to understand that tradition and effectiveness didn't always align. The psychological dimension of weapon selection troubled some observers. Would soldiers trust a foreign weapon the way they trusted American steel? Dr. James Patterson, a military psychologist consulting on the program, worried that adopting a foreign sidearm might undermine the confidence that came from carrying weapons forged by American workers. Confidence could mean the difference between hesitation and decisive action in combat. Yet Patterson's own research suggested that soldiers adapted quickly to effective equipment, regardless of its origin. Performance bred confidence more reliably than patriotism, and dead soldiers couldn't appreciate the nationality of their weapons. The question wasn't whether American soldiers could learn to trust Italian engineering, but whether American leadership could overcome its own prejudices long enough to give them that opportunity. As winter deepened around Aberdeen, the testing data accumulated into undeniable patterns. The Beretta M9 was proving itself superior to its competitors in nearly every measurable category. Yet measurement and acceptance were different challenges entirely, and the hardest tests still lay ahead. How do you balance loyalty to tradition with the demands of survival. The telegram arrived at Marangoni's Brescia apartment on a cold February morning in 1985, its terse language hiding momentous implications. Phase 1 complete stop proceeding to field trials stop. His wife, Elena, watched her husband's hands tremble slightly as he read the message for the third time. After 43 years of refinement, revision, and quiet hope, his pistol design was moving beyond the laboratory toward actual military service. Elena remembered the war years when Tullio would sketch in secret, hiding his drawings beneath loose floorboards whenever German patrols passed their street. The young engineer, who had been forced to produce weapons for occupying forces, had channeled his frustration into imagining better designs. Weapons that could serve justice rather than tyranny. Now, incredibly, those same designs might arm the soldiers of the nation that had liberated Italy. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. During the war, American GIs carrying .45 caliber pistols had represented freedom itself. Young Tullio had studied their weapons whenever possible, noting how the big American pistols worked reliably despite crude manufacturing tolerances that Italian precision could improve. He had dreamed of creating something that combined American ruggedness with Italian refinement, a weapon worthy of heroes. Across the Atlantic, the field trials were proving more complex than laboratory testing. At Fort Benning, Georgia, actual soldiers were putting the competing pistols through realistic scenarios, urban combat simulations, desert training exercises, and Arctic warfare drills that tested both weapons and their users. Staff Sergeant Michael Rodriguez of the 82nd Airborne found himself assigned to evaluate the Beretta during airborne operations, a task that would determine whether the Italian pistol could withstand the shock of parachute landings and the demands of rapid deployment. Rodriguez had carried a .45 through 2 deployments to Central America, and he approached the Beretta with the skepticism that experienced soldiers reserved for any change in their equipment. His first impression was disappointment. The weapon felt light, almost toy-like compared to the substantial heft of the M1911. But as training exercises progressed, Rodriguez began to appreciate subtle advantages. The Beretta's balance made quick target acquisition easier. Its higher capacity meant fewer magazine changes during sustained engagements, and its lighter weight was less fatiguing during long patrols. More importantly, the pistol worked. Day after day, through mud, sand, and simulated combat stress, the Beretta functioned with mechanical reliability that earned grudging respect from soldiers who had learned to distrust innovation. Stories began circulating through the NCO ranks about pistols that continued functioning after being dropped from aircraft, buried in Iraqi sand, and exposed to temperature extremes that would challenge any weapon. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Williams, the officer coordinating human factors testing, documented these reactions with growing interest. Her reports noted that soldier acceptance varied by background. Younger troops adapted quickly to the Beretta's characteristics, while veterans often needed weeks to overcome their attachment to the .45. Combat experience seemed to predict openness to change. Soldiers who had faced actual enemy fire cared more about effectiveness than tradition. But tradition carried enormous weight in military culture. Master Sergeant David Thompson, a Vietnam veteran with 28 years of service, submitted an evaluation report that captured the emotional complexity surrounding the pistol trials. The Beretta shoots straight and doesn't jam, but it doesn't feel like an American weapon. When you're alone in the dark and scared, you want to carry something that connects you to all the soldiers who came before. That's worth something, even if it can't be measured. Thompson's concerns resonated beyond individual preference. Military units derived cohesion partly from shared equipment and traditions. Would adopting a foreign sidearm undermine the cultural bonds that helped soldiers function under extreme stress? Dr. Patterson's psychological studies suggested that effectiveness ultimately mattered more than symbolism. but the transition period could create uncertainty that affected performance. Meanwhile, congressional opposition was intensifying. Representative Morrison had organized a coalition of lawmakers demanding answers about foreign dependency and industrial security. His February hearing featured testimony from American manufacturers who argued that domestic production capabilities were strategic assets too valuable to sacrifice for marginal performance improvements. Colt Industries presented data suggesting that their enhanced M1911 variants could match the Beretta's performance while maintaining American production. Colonel Haskell faced increasingly hostile questioning during these hearings. When pressed about foreign reliability during wartime, he cited NATO standardization requirements and ammunition compatibility benefits. When challenged about American jobs, he emphasized that Beretta had committed to establishing U.S. production facilities. When questioned about national security, he focused on soldier safety and mission effectiveness. But political pressure was mounting to find reasons to reject the Italian pistol, regardless of test results. Anonymous sources within the Pentagon suggested that the competition had been structured to favor foreign entries. Defense contractors funded studies questioning the Beretta's long-term durability. Trade publications ran articles about Italian industrial espionage and questionable business practices. Through it all, the testing continued with clinical objectivity. At Aberdeen, technicians recorded failure rates, accuracy measurements, and maintenance requirements without regard for political implications. The data painted an increasingly clear picture. The Beretta M9 outperformed its competitors by margins too significant to ignore. Yet scientific evidence and procurement decisions operated in different realms, and superior performance guaranteed nothing in Washington's political environment. Back in Brescia, Marangoni followed American news reports with growing anxiety. His wife noticed that he had begun working longer hours in his small workshop, refining designs for pistols that might never see production. Engineering had always been his refuge during uncertain times. The precise language of mechanics offered comfort that human affairs could not provide. Elena worried about her husband's health as political opposition to his design intensified. The man who had survived German occupation and decades of disappointment now seemed fragile in the face of American bureaucracy. His life's work hung in the balance, subject to forces beyond his control or comprehension. The decision would reshape not only American military procurement, but also the global defense industry. If the world's most powerful military adopted foreign weapons, other nations would follow. Arms manufacturers understood that winning American contracts meant access to worldwide markets worth billions of dollars. Do you think you'd cling to what you were taught back home, or to what your own eyes see in a place like this? Comment which side you'd lean toward, and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. What happens when excellence must overcome prejudice to save lives? The spring of 1985 brought unseasonable warmth to Aberdeen Proving Ground, where the final phase of testing was approaching completion. Dr. Chen had spent countless hours analyzing data that told an unmistakable story. The Beretta M9 had achieved a mean rounds between failure rate of 35,000, nearly 5 times the requirement. Its accuracy remained consistent across temperature extremes that spanned over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Most significantly, it had passed every endurance test, while its competitors succumbed to mechanical failures or performance degradation. Yet numbers alone couldn't capture what Colonel Haskell observed during soldier interviews. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, initially skeptical of the Italian pistol, now carried it with confidence that bordered on enthusiasm. His written evaluation noted, "After 3 months of training with the M9, I trust it completely. The weapon has never failed me, and its characteristics have actually improved my marksmanship. I would be comfortable carrying this pistol into combat." Similar testimonials accumulated from soldiers across different units and specializations. Tank crews appreciated the M9's compact size in cramped vehicle interiors. Military police valued its higher ammunition capacity during urban patrols. Special operations forces noted its reliability in harsh environments. The pattern was consistent. Initial skepticism giving way to grudging acceptance, then to genuine confidence. But institutional resistance remained formidable. At the Pentagon, procurement officials faced enormous pressure to find technical justifications for rejecting the Beretta. Anonymous memoranda circulated questioning the pistol's stopping power, reliability projections, and ammunition costs. Some critics argued that 9mm ammunition lacked the proven battlefield effectiveness of the .45 ACP cartridge, citing World War II reports of enemy soldiers continuing to fight after multiple 9mm hits. Dr. Patterson's psychological studies revealed the complexity underlying these objections. Many senior officers had personal experiences that shaped their weapon preferences in ways that transcended rational analysis. Lieutenant General Robert Hayes, a decorated Vietnam veteran, testified before Congress that soldiers don't need more bullets. They need bullets that work the first time. His opposition to the 9mm cartridge reflected battlefield memories of .45 caliber effectiveness against determined enemies. Yet Patterson's research also documented how such memories could become misleading over time. Combat reports from Vietnam showed that shot placement mattered more than caliber, and that soldiers carrying higher capacity weapons engaged targets more aggressively because they worried less about ammunition conservation. The psychological advantage of having more rounds available often proved more tactically significant than the ballistic advantage of larger bullets. Meanwhile, in Brescia, Marangoni was experiencing health problems that his family attributed to stress over the American decision. At 73, the engineer who had survived World War II and decades of industrial competition found himself emotionally invested in validation that might never come. His workshop had become a shrine to mechanical precision, filled with prototypes and refinements that represented a lifetime of dedication to his craft. Elena often found her husband staring at newspaper clippings about the American tests, unable to concentrate on other projects. The man who had once channeled his frustration with German occupation into creative engineering now seemed paralyzed by uncertainty about American politics. His doctor prescribed rest, but Marangoni couldn't stop thinking about soldiers whose lives might depend on his weapons' reliability. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. During NATO exercises in West Germany, American units equipped with prototype M9 pistols trained alongside European allies carrying similar weapons. For the first time, American soldiers experienced the logistical advantages of ammunition standardization. They could share 9mm rounds with German, British, and French forces without compatibility concerns. This seemingly minor detail had enormous strategic implications for alliance warfare. Colonel James Murphy, commanding the American training unit, reported that ammunition standardization simplified supply chains and reduced logistics vulnerability in ways that could prove decisive during sustained combat. His recommendation carried unusual weight because Murphy had earned his reputation during actual combat operations, not bureaucratic maneuvering. When Murphy stated that logistics wins wars and the M9 makes our logistics simpler, even skeptical officials paid attention. The political landscape began shifting as practical advantages overcame emotional attachments. Beretta's commitment to establishing American production facilities addressed some security concerns while providing economic benefits to domestic communities. The company's willingness to transfer technology and train American workers demonstrated serious long-term commitment to the U.S. market. Representative Morrison facing re-election pressure, quietly withdrew his most strident objections after Beretta announced plans to locate its American facility in Maryland, within his district's economic sphere. The congressman who had questioned foreign dependency became an advocate for international cooperation when it promised jobs for his constituents. By summer 1985, the technical evaluation was essentially complete. Every objective measurement favored the Beretta M9, and field testing had confirmed its practical advantages. Yet the final decision remained months away as procurement officials navigated political sensitivities and bureaucratic procedures that could delay or derail any conclusion. Marangoni's health continued deteriorating as he awaited news from America. His family physician, Dr. Giuseppe Moretti, noticed symptoms that suggested cardiovascular stress related to prolonged anxiety. Elena began limiting her husband's access to newspapers and encouraging him to focus on his workshop projects rather than events beyond his control. The irony was profound. The man whose engineering genius had created a weapon capable of protecting thousands of soldiers now found himself vulnerable to stresses that his own creation might have helped him overcome. His lifetime of precision work had prepared him for every challenge, except waiting powerlessly while others evaluated his life's work. In Aberdeen's testing chambers, the final M9 prototypes sat in climate-controlled storage, their mechanical perfection documented in thousands of pages of technical reports. The weapons that might reshape American military procurement looked deceptively ordinary, black polymer and steel assemblies that betrayed no hint of their revolutionary potential. The future remained uncertain, balanced between political expedience and military necessity, between tradition and innovation, between national pride and alliance requirements. But the testing phase was ending, and decision time was approaching. Can excellence overcome politics when lives hang in the balance? The call came to Marangoni's apartment at 3:47 a.m. on January 14, 1985. Through the crackling international connection, a Beretta executive delivered news that would validate 4 decades of patient engineering. "Tullio, the Americans have chosen the M9. Your pistol will arm the United States military." Eleanor watched her husband's face transform as he absorbed the magnitude of this moment. The weapon he had secretly sketched during German occupation would now protect the soldiers of freedom. But victory carried unexpected weight. As details emerged about the procurement decision, Marangoni learned that his pistol would replace the venerable M1911, a weapon that had served American forces through 2 world wars, Korea and Vietnam. The emotional significance of this displacement troubled the elderly engineer more than he had anticipated. He understood the honor of selection, but he also recognized the responsibility of replacing an icon. In Washington, the official announcement triggered reactions that ranged from grudging acceptance to open hostility. The decision to adopt the M9 sparked congressional investigations and accusations of rigged testing. American manufacturers cried foul, claiming that foreign interests had corrupted the selection process. Colt Industries filed formal protests, questioning test procedures and evaluation criteria. Smith & Wesson demanded access to detailed scoring methodologies. Colonel Haskell found himself defending not just a procurement decision, but the integrity of the entire military acquisition process. His testimony before Congress emphasized objective performance data. The Beretta had fired 90,000 rounds with minimal failures, maintained accuracy across extreme temperatures, and demonstrated reliability that exceeded all competitors. Yet facts competed unsuccessfully with emotions in congressional hearing rooms, where political theater mattered more than technical merit. Master Sergeant Thompson's reaction captured the psychological complexity that many soldiers experienced. In his final evaluation report, he wrote, "I've carried a .45 for 15 years, and it saved my life in Vietnam. The Beretta shoots better and jams less, but it doesn't feel like it belongs to America." Maybe my grandchildren will feel differently, but this transition is going to be hard for soldiers like me." Thompson's honesty reflected broader military sentiment. Many career soldiers understood the M9's technical superiority while struggling to accept emotional displacement of the M1911. The .45 had become more than a weapon. It represented continuity with America's military heritage, connection to soldiers who had carried identical pistols through previous wars. Dr. Patterson's psychological studies documented this transition with clinical precision. His research showed that weapon loyalty operated at unconscious levels that rational argument couldn't easily overcome. Soldiers developed emotional attachments to equipment that had protected them, creating resistance to change that persisted even when new weapons proved superior. The challenge wasn't technical but psychological, helping troops transfer trust from familiar tools to unfamiliar ones. Yet gradually, as the M9 proved itself in training and early deployments, attitudes began to shift. The pistol's 15-round magazine capacity provided tactical advantages that couldn't be ignored. Its lighter weight reduced fatigue during long missions. Most importantly, it worked reliably in conditions that would challenge any weapon. Performance bred confidence more effectively than tradition, and soldiers began accepting the Italian pistol as genuinely American through service rather than origin. The true test came during Operation Urgent Fury in Grenada, where small numbers of prototype M9 pistols saw their first combat use. Staff Sergeant Maria Gonzalez of the 82nd Airborne carried one of these weapons during the assault on Point Salines Airport. In her after-action report, she noted, "The M9 functioned perfectly during sustained firefights. I went through 3 magazines without a single malfunction. The weapon gave me confidence because I knew it would work when I needed it." Similar reports filtered back from other combat actions throughout the 1980s. Military police units in Central America found the M9 reliable during urban operations. Special forces teams appreciated its accuracy during precision missions. Tank crews valued its compact size in cramped vehicle interiors. Each successful deployment strengthened the case for full adoption while weakening resistance from tradition-minded critics. Meanwhile, in Brescia, Marangoni was experiencing the profound satisfaction of seeing his life's work vindicated through military service. Letters from American soldiers reached him through Beretta's corporate channels, describing how his pistol had performed in combat conditions. One tank commander wrote, "Your weapon saved my life during a firefight in Honduras. It worked when everything else was failing." Another soldier noted, "The M9 shoots straighter than anything I've carried. Thank you for building something we can trust." These testimonials affected Marangoni more deeply than any technical accolade. His engineering had always been motivated by desire to protect soldiers, not to achieve commercial success. Knowing that his designs were actually saving lives fulfilled the purpose that had driven him since witnessing warfare's mechanical limitations during World War II. But success carried its own burdens. As the M9 entered full production for American military service, Marangoni understood that his weapon would be used in conflicts he couldn't predict or control. The pistol that represented his contribution to peace through strength might also enable actions that contradicted his personal values. Engineering excellence was morally neutral. Its virtue depended entirely on how others chose to employ it. The old engineer began experiencing what Elena recognized as survivor's guilt. While he celebrated professional validation, he also worried about soldiers who might die because they carried his weapon instead of some hypothetical alternative. Such concerns were irrational. The M9 had proven superior to every competitor, but rationality provided little comfort to a man whose life's work would influence countless future conflicts. Dr. Moretti, treating Marangoni's stress-related symptoms, understood that his patient was struggling with the weight of historical responsibility. The weapon that might protect American democracy could also become a symbol of American power projection worldwide. For an engineer whose work had been motivated by desire to serve justice, this moral complexity was deeply troubling. What happens when your life's work becomes bigger than you ever imagined? The Gulf War of 1991 would provide the M9's definitive combat test. Hundreds of thousands of American soldiers deployed to the Middle East, carrying Marangoni's pistol design, now 6 years into full military service. In the desert heat of Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, where temperatures soared above 120 degrees Fahrenheit and sand infiltrated every piece of equipment, the Italian engineers' emphasis on reliability would prove prescient. Captain Jennifer Walsh of the 24th Infantry Division carried her M9 through the 100-hour ground war, where it performed flawlessly despite conditions that challenged every weapon system. In her personal journal, she wrote, "The M9 never failed me during the entire deployment. It worked in sandstorms, during river crossings, and in urban combat where split-second reliability meant everything. I can't imagine trusting my life to anything else." Stories filtered back of pistols that continued functioning after being buried in sand, dropped from vehicles, and exposed to temperature extremes that spanned over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Military police found the weapon reliable and intuitive during checkpoint operations. Tank crews appreciated its compact size in cramped vehicle interiors. Support personnel valued its ease of maintenance during extended operations with limited logistic support. The weapon that had been dismissed as foreign compromise had proven itself as American as any tool of war. Yet the M9's adoption represented something larger than mere equipment modernization. It marked America's acknowledgement that military effectiveness sometimes required setting aside national pride in favor of proven performance. The decision established precedents for future acquisitions, opening doors for international cooperation that would define modern military procurement. NATO's standardization became reality, not just aspiration. For Marangoni, who died in 1988, just 3 years after his design's American adoption, the M9's success represented vindication of a lifetime spent perfecting mechanical precision. His poverty-born obsession with reliability, his wartime sketches refined across decades, had created a weapon that would serve American forces for over 3 decades. The clockmaker's son had built something more enduring than any timepiece. He had crafted a tool that would protect those who protected freedom. Elena received letters from American soldiers throughout the 1990s, describing how her husband's pistol had performed in conflicts from Somalia to Bosnia. One Marine wrote, "Mrs. Marangoni, your husband's weapon worked perfectly during street fighting in Mogadishu. The M9's reliability gave us confidence when everything else was uncertain." Another soldier noted, "I carried your husband's pistol through 3 deployments. It never failed when I needed it most." These testimonials would have meant everything to Marangoni, who had always measured success by his ability to protect soldiers rather than achieve commercial recognition. His engineering philosophy, that reliability mattered more than innovation, that function trumped form, had created a weapon system that earned respect through performance rather than marketing. The psychological transition that Dr. Patterson had documented continued throughout the 1990s as younger soldiers entered service, knowing no other military sidearm. For these troops, the M9 wasn't a foreign replacement for American tradition. It was simply their pistol, as American as their uniforms and training. Master Sergeant Thompson, initially resistant to the Italian weapon, eventually acknowledged, "My concerns were about the past, not the future. The M9 has proven itself worthy of the soldiers who carry it." Colonel Haskell, reflecting on the procurement decision years later, noted that the M9 controversy had taught important lessons about military acquisition. "Technical excellence must sometimes overcome political preferences," he observed. "Our job is to give soldiers the best possible equipment, regardless of where it comes from. National security requires setting aside sentiment in favor of effectiveness." The Beretta M9 served American forces through Somalia, Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan, accumulating millions of rounds in combat conditions. It became the sidearm of a generation of soldiers who knew no other military pistol. When the Army finally began replacing it with the Sig Sauer M17 in 2017, the decision sparked debates reminiscent of the original adoption, proof that soldiers had finally accepted the Italian pistol as truly American. The replacement process revealed how completely the M9 had become integrated into American military culture. Soldiers who had carried it through multiple deployments expressed attachment that echoed earlier resistance to its adoption. "The M9 has been with me through everything," noted Sergeant Major Lisa Rodriguez. "It's not just a weapon, it's part of who we are as soldiers." Training facilities at Aberdeen Proving Ground, where the original testing had occurred, now displayed the M9 as a historical artifact representing successful international cooperation in defense procurement. The sterile testing chambers where Lieutenant Colonel Crane had first examined the sleek black pistol now housed exhibits explaining how foreign innovation had strengthened American military capability. Dr. Chen, retired from government service, occasionally visited these displays while reflecting on her role in the M9's selection. "We proved that excellence has no nationality," she observed. "The best weapon won because we focused on performance rather than prejudice. That's how procurement should work in a democracy." In Brescia, the Beretta factory continued producing M9 pistols for American forces well into the 21st century. A small memorial to Tullio Marangoni reminded workers that their products served soldiers whose lives depended on mechanical reliability. His workshop, preserved exactly as he left it, displayed the sketches and prototypes that had evolved into one of the world's most successful military sidearms. Elena, before her own death in 2003, established a scholarship fund for engineering students at the University of Brescia. The program emphasized that technical excellence should serve humanitarian purposes, honoring her husband's belief that engineering existed to protect rather than destroy. Recipients studied precision manufacturing with the understanding that their work might someday save lives. In the end, the M9 represented more than successful military procurement. It embodied a lesson about innovation, tradition, and the courage required to choose effectiveness over sentiment. The mind behind the weapon had bridged continents and generations, proving that genius recognizes no borders when lives hang in the balance. The clicking of slides in training facilities worldwide continues to echo Marangoni's precision. Each sound represents a choice made decades earlier, the decision to trust excellence over origin, performance over politics, and future capability over past comfort. It reminds us that sometimes the tools that protect us come from unexpected sources, and that wisdom lies in recognizing worth regardless of its homeland. If this story reminded you that even in the darkest times, small acts of humanity still matter, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story. How do you measure the weight of a decision that spans generations?